So this is the session or session series on the miasm, understanding or complete understanding of the miasm. Now we started the first session last Friday. I think most of the peoples are in the condition that if we are studying the miasm, what is the role of studying the cell, which is the basic unit of life, right? Because most of the people has set of mind understanding the miasm is nothing but the understanding the mental symptoms or mental expression. Most of the time I have seen, even in my college time when I was student, and nowadays also, the students or the interns miasmatically categorize the mental symptoms into the sora, psychotic and syphilis. And whatever the symptoms, especially the mental symptoms are predominant, मतलब साइकोसिस में अगर मेंटल सिम्टम्स ज्यादा है या सोरा में ज्यादा है, तो दे स्टैम्प that case as a soric miasm, psychotic miasm, or according to that, which was the and which is the totally wrong concept of understanding the miasm or considering the miasm. It has nothing to do with the mental symptoms, right? So understanding the miasm is in that way is not a right scientific way. And if you want to understand the miasm in a scientific way, we have to first understand the body. And to understand the body, we have to understand system, tissue, organ, and the basic unit of that all is the cell. Because the importance of miasm, until and unless you don't know what is the importance of miasm in practice, you can't able to study it properly. Just learning the miasm is not sufficient. We have to apply it practically, scientifically in the practice, so that our practice get boost. Our practice get boost. Now this is applicable even for the Praful Vijayakar sir, who when he started the practice long back, and one call was come for the ICU admitted patient. The sir has visited that, but he was quite anxious that because there was a first time he visited the coma patient and he has to give the medicine. बराबर है? But he
Similar.
studied well. He studied well, but until he studied and come to the medicine, that the relatives shown that case to other senior fellow, senior homeopath, and that homeopath give the medicine, and the patient become all right. When he asked, Praful Vijarkar asked that senior consultant, what you prescribed to that patient. So that time he prescribed the Hellebores. बराबर है. That time the sir doesn't know how to approach such a type of cases, because there was a starting point or beginning of the practice, and I think most of the peoples, including me or everyone, gets confused or get anxious in the initial period of the practice. They don't know. That's why we are here to learn and boost our practice. Now when he ask that fellow homeopath or senior homeopath ki why you prescribe the Hellebores, he told that he told to sir that ki the patient is in the comatose state and there is a irritation in the brain, and patients get intermittent shrieking and shouting in the coma. And if you see, there is a jerkiness of the extremities which indicates the irritation of the brain, right? Which indicates the irritation of brain. Then the remedy, think of remedy like a Hellebores and Belladonna. So that's why the Hellebores was indicated. Now, after a few months, again the call has come to see the coma patient, but that time the pathology was different. That time the pathology was different. The pathology, the coma, or the patient was unconscious because of the astrocytoma, means tumor of the brain with hydrocephalus. Barabar hai? It is one of the type of astrocytoma is a type of glioma, which is the most dangerous tumor of the brain. Now, after studying, and Dr. Vijayakar sir get the similar symptoms of shrieking, barabar, jerkiness in extremity, and all the symptom which has seen in the previous case where the Helleboros was prescribed. That's why the sir has given the Helleboros. But there was no result, no improvement in the patient. Thereafter, sir has prescribed the belladonna, but there was no result, no improvement in the that coma patient. So that time the sir has increased the doses, try the higher potency, but in spite of that, the patient died, got succumb, right? So sir doesn't understood that why this happened, though there is a similar symptoms. And after a few days, one of the sir's uh, uh, student explain one case, explain one case of coma, which is due to the liver cirrhosis, which is due to the liver cirrhosis. And he has prescribed the belladonna, that student fellow prescribed the belladonna, and patient come out of that coma with the prescription of belladonna. But though he come out of the coma, he was unable to talk, unable to walk, right? Living a vegetative life, though come out of coma. Now, these three cases shattered the Praful Vijayakar sir's mind, and he deeply thought, ki, why this happened? Though we are prescribing on the similar symptomatology, why, though the remedies indicated on the basis of symptoms, why there is a different result? And now he understood the role of miasm, the importance of miasm, why though the symptom similarity is the same, the expression of the symptom disease is same, but the pathology is different. The first pathology was the functional pathology, second was the tumor of the brain, barabar, which is cancerous in nature, and third pathology is the cirrhosis of liver with the hepatic encephalopathy, right? So we have to understand not only the symptoms but the underlying pathology, that means the miasm. And when we practice, or when we consider this miasm and derive the totality according to this consideration, then we can come to the proper remedy selection, right? So in the first session, we have seen why the Hahnemann was unsatisfied with their prevailing practice. So why, that's why they studied it for 10 years, 12 years, and come to the conclusion that there are there are the warts, venereal warts, and there are the chancres, which is responsible for most of the disease conditions. Like that time, even Hahnemann don't have the advanced technology, but he has developed, have that sense, which we see that even that things are exactly correct even now in the 21st century, right? In this century. Now here we are trying to connect the cell to the miasm. In what way we are trying to connect this cell into the miasm, that we have to see, right? We seen that we discuss about the cell function. We see that the need of the cell The need of the cell is to survive. Need of the every human being, first need of the every human being is the survive. Second, and for survival, he needs the cell needs the energy. Then another functions another function of the cell is the reproduction or generation for the survival of species. First function is for the survival of self, to gain the nutrition and to gain the oxygen in order to survive. This is the basic need of the every cell, every human being. Second is the reproduction for the survival of community and species, right? And third is the to protect both self and the species. And in order to protect this, we need a immunity, right? So Robin's pathology it state that this is already we discussed in the last session. This is a quick review. Most of the disease in organ are caused by the dearrangement at the cellular level. The disease doesn't come suddenly in the system. In order to affect the system, first organ should be affected, and before the organ affected, the tissue gets affected, and before tissue, the individual cell is getting altered or affected. So if the disease occur, that means the changes occurred at the cellular level. That is the most important to understand, right? So the growth, derangement or disorder like inflammation or growth or destruction are due to nothing but the defense mechanism of the cell. Are nothing but the defense mechanism of the cell. Now in the material body, disease start in the cell. I already explained. When the physical disease occurred, its trace its origin at the injury to the organ. All forms of organ injury start with the physiological, molecular, and structural alteration in the cell. This is uh, coined by the father of modern pathology, that is the Rudolf Virchow. रुडोल्फ विर्को का ये कहना था कि all forms of organ injury start with the alteration in the cell. मतलब अगर डिसीज हुआ है तो it should be at the base level, right? This means whatever the disease a person comes with at physical level, one need to understand the changes that occurs in the cell of affected organ, not at the system level. So if you want to study microscopically, if you study microscopically why the person is suffered with this disease, then you have to study the cell. The modern medicine goes only as far as the determine the changes at the systemic level or the organ level, right? So in cases of gastritis क्या करता है कि inflammation हो गया stomach में, gastric HCl ज्यादा secrete हो रहा, तो they inhibit the hydrochloric acid by giving the antacid, and they benumb the pain by giving the painkiller, but they doesn't try to understand why this cell is so sensitive to the specific food. If the complaint start after taking the spicy food, so if this spicy food given to the community or large number of people, that every person doesn't affect with the gastritis or doesn't cause the gastritis, that is the inflammation of stomach. Why this so? Why these particular peoples are so sensitive to this spicy food or particular things or food? That means their cells are getting sensitive. So why, what was the reason that the cell in the stomach is getting sensitive? That's the reason we have to find out, right? What the modern medicine teaches us to neutralize the effect when cause remains the constant. And the cause at the cellular or glandular or secretory level is definitely a genetically governed. It is not whatever the changes that occur because of particular cause, means after taking a spicy food, तो अगर gastritis हो रहा है, this is genetically governed. बराबर है. So whatever the changes occur at the cell or tissue level, it is a genetically governed, as it is obvious that in similar condition and with similar food, all the individual on the earth will not show the same symptom. बराबर है कि नहीं? अगर कंडीशन सेम है और फूड भी सेम है, तो all the peoples, group of people doesn't show the similar symptom of acid peptic disorder. Or the symptoms of this burning and inflammation doesn't means it is only a acute inflammation. It could be due to the some other disease pathology, or it may be indurative pathology, or it may be destructive process going on in the gastric lining. So without understanding the pathological process or underlying a disease, it is foolish to treat the patient with any healing science, right? If the homeopath consider himself as a holistic approacher, right, or holistic healer, he has no right to neglect the unit of life, that is the cell, tissue, organ, and the system, which is the building block of man, right? So the genetically rule program of metabolism, of differentiation, of every process, respiration, digestion, differentiation of the person on the basis of color, physics, height. बराबर, ये किससे समझ में आता है? बराबर है कि नहीं? कौन कलर फेयर रहेगा, कौन ब्लैक रहेगा, उसका हाइट कितना रहेगा, फिजिकल में कैसा रहेगा, हु डिसाइड दिस? दिस इज इन द दिस इज डिसाइड, this find its root in the every cell, where the nucleus is there, where the genetic material, genetic blueprint is there in the nucleus, and which decide the whole organism. So in the genetic apparatus of the cell, thus the idea of individualization has its root in the every cell. So we can individualize the person at its base level, that means at the cell, right? So can a homeopath afford to neglect this cell? So we can conclude that the disease manifestation are basically a defense mechanism at work, right? Disease manifestation are basically a defense mechanism at work. So whatever the disease are expressing, the disease symptoms, disease pathology are nothing but the active miasm at present that time in that person, right? So the disease manifestation, try to understand, this is very important sentence. Disease manifestation are basically a defense mechanism at work, means at that point, at that state. बराबर है कि नहीं? So how we explain, how we understand this, कि कैसे होता है कि कैसे हम समझेंगे ये डिसीज एक्सप्रेशन और डिसीज मैनिफेस्टेशन, बराबर है कि नहीं? कैसे हम समझेंगे कि अगर कुछ होता है तो उसमें सिवेरिटी क्या है, उसमें कौन सा है, डिस्ट्रक्शन ज्यादा है, ग्रोथ ज्यादा है, कि फंक्शनल चेंजेस हुआ है सिर्फ. if you see the few police in your area, बराबर है, यू कैन बी सरप्राइज कि क्या हुआ है, मतलब कोई चोरी हुई है क्या, किसी को किसी ने मारा, किसी का झगड़ा हुआ है क्या, बराबर है कि नहीं? इफ द पीपल्स आर लुकिंग, gathering in the group and discussing, that means something, there is a disharmony occur in that area, that's why the peoples gather. But if you see the van where there is a lot of police is there, with investigation team is there, then you will be surprised कि आप quite frightened कि ये क्या हो गया एकदम. Is there the murder occur, dacoity or robbery occur? So that means something large is happened here, something big is happened here, that leads to come the lot of polices or police van and the investigation team, बराबर है कि नहीं? So जब कुछ होता है, बराबर है, so accordingly the defense system comes, बराबर है. अगर किसी का जस्ट झगड़ा हुआ है, घर में झगड़ा हुआ है, तो 2-3 पुलिस ही आएंगे, पर अगर मर्डर हुआ है तो number of polices increases, number of defenses, policemen like a defense, they are protecting, they are guarding, बराबर है कि नहीं? So accordingly the tranquility or normalcy in the area has been disturbed that warrant that the defense mechanism is needed. So the जैसे हम देखेंगे कि अगर बॉर्डर पे अगर गोलीबारी होती है, बराबर है, अगर बॉर्डर पे कुछ चल रहा है, गोलीबारी हो रही है, पर अगर बॉर्डर पे तोफ या फिर वायुसेना के हेलीकॉप्टर आके अगर ये करते हैं, जो दुश्मन लोग हैं उन पे अटैक करते हैं, दैट मीन समथिंग बिग इज हैपेंड, मतलब अभी तो युद्ध होने वाला है। मतलब कैसे है कि फंक्शनल लेवल पे अगर चीजें अगर छोटी हैं तो हमको उसी तरह से एक्सप्रेशंस दिखेंगे, चीज अगर उससे बड़ी है और चेंज ऑकर्स एट उससे भी ज्यादा है तो उस तरह से हमको डिफेंस सिस्टम एक्टिव दिखेंगे, बराबर है कि नहीं? अभी ये तो एक्सटर्नल हो गया। नाउ द सिमिलर पैटर्न हमारा डिफेंस भी वैसे ही यूज होता है, बराबर है कि नहीं? तो somewhat on the same line the symptom produced by the body as a response to external invasive or irritating force or agent, मतलब जब external force अटैक करता है, so depending on the capacity, depending on the intensity of the attacking agent, virulence of the microorganism, बराबर है कि नहीं? तो डिसीज मैनिफेस्टेशन उस तरह से रहेगा, डिसीज एक्सप्रेशन उस तरह से रहेंगे, बराबर है? सो द सिम्टम ऑफ इन्फ्लेमेशन लाइक अ पेन, रेडनेस, स्वेलिंग, then stiffness, then indiscretion, growth and destruction of tissue are nothing but the result of body's defense mechanism. मतलब जो भी बॉडी एक्सप्रेस कर रहा है, when there is a attack by the microorganism, attack by irritating agent, attack by some external force, तो बॉडी उसको कैसे डिफेंड कर रहा है? बॉडी उसको डिफेंड कर रहा है बाय इन्फ्लेमेशन, बॉडी डिपेंड कर रहा है बाय ग्रोथ, बाय पॉलिप और बाय द डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ सेल्स. दिस इज द genetically governed and this is the expression of the at the cellular level. And though it is an expression at the cellular level, cells level, tissue level, or organ level, but it is controlled by the genetic apparatus. Right? That's why if you want to understand the genetic remedy or genetic constitutional remedy, we have to go at the root of the person. That's why in order to understand the genetic constitutional remedy, we studied the basic nature of that person, the root nature, the basic nature, and the root cause of the disease, or the changes that occurs at the cellular level or tissue level. Barabar? Then only we can able to understand it properly. So to survive, the genetically governed defense system of a cell as also of the organism as a whole tries to manipulate the internal and external environment of the so that the envisioned harm. तो अभी जब एक्सटर्नल एजेंट और माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म अटैक करता है बॉडी पे, तो आवर सिस्टम गेट्स एक्टिवेटेड और गेट इन द अलर्ट मोड. अभी अगर माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म एंटर्ड हो गया थ्रू द नोज, बराबर है कि नहीं? माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म बैक्टीरियल इन्फेक्शन हो गया, वायरल इन्फेक्शन हो गया, एंटर्स थ्रू द नोज, व्हाट द नोज म्यूकस मेम्ब्रेन डू? दे इंक्रीज द सिक्रेशन ऑफ द नेसल म्यूकोजा. Why there is an increased secretion of the nasal mucosa? By that mechanism, the body tries to wipe out the microorganism outside. मतलब जो सर्दी बाहर निकलेंगी उससे माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म और इन्फेक्टिव एजेंट जो है वो डिस्ट्रॉय हो जाएगा या बाहर चले जाएगा आउट ऑफ द बॉडी, बराबर है कि नहीं? सो दिस इज द वे ऑफ हैंडलिंग द microorganism, way of handling the attacking agent by the body, that means by the every cell. So how they react to the particular agent or particular microorganism, that is we have to understand. So if by altering the mucous membrane or secreting the nasal, by increase the secretion, if that organism is not wiped out, then the mucosa gets irritated, reddened, and gets inflamed. बराबर है कि नहीं? To keep away that microorganism. Like that, it may the changes may occur according to the that genetically governed वो सिस्टम जो है या बॉडी जो है वो अभी इन्फ्लेमेटरी रिएक्शन दिखाता है. उसके बाद अगर रिएक्शन उसका चेंज होता है, हाउ दे चेंज, इन व्हाट वे change, that we will see in the next slide. The changes which occur in the cell and tissue in order to defend or repair the damage, बराबर, whatever the changes that occurs might be कि सेल में चेंजेस हुए इन द फॉर्म ऑफ सेल वॉल इंडूरेट हो गई है, बराबर है, हार्डन हो गई टू प्रोटेक्ट फ्रॉम द माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म. माइट बी सेल प्रोड्यूस द लाइसोजाइम, सम एंजाइम सीक्रेट कर रही है इन ऑर्डर टू डिस्ट्रॉय द माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म. सो व्हाट एवर द चेंजेस दैट ऑकर्स ड्यू टू द अटैकिंग एजेंट, बराबर, इट इज नथिंग बट द pathology of that disease. Try to understand it. This the changes which occurs in the cell and tissue in order to defend or repair. Whatever the changes or whatever the things that happen because of the microorganism, मतलब defend में और repair में, the damage में aesthetically terms called pathology of that disease. So whatever the changes occurs because of the attacking microorganism, changes by the cell or tissue, this is nothing but the pathology of that disease. Pathology of that disease. अगर for example simple example है कि even though we can take the example of the in COVID, अभी माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म तो सबके लिए सेम था. कोविड का माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म वायरल इन्फेक्शन है ना, everyone or most of the people attacked by the same organism, but the expression by the cells, tissue, system or the individual person is differ. Some people just have the fever, body ache and all this and gets managed on its own. Some people directly goes into the hypoxia after fever. There may be lot of cough, lot of breathlessness, है ना. तो किसी को घर में मैनेज हुआ, कोई हॉस्पिटल में मैनेज हुआ, कोई आईसीयू में मैनेज हुआ और कोई मैनेज ही नहीं हुआ. All this reaction by the tissue, organ or system is nothing but that pathology is nothing but pathology is caused because of the particular miasm. In that particular situation, वो स्टेट में कौन सा माइजम एक्टिवेट है, बराबर है, वो सोरिक है बंदा या सोरिक माइजम एक्टिवेट है, साइकोटिक है या सिपिलिटिक है, दैट डिसाइड, मतलब जेनेटिकली गवर्न कि जिन कौन से स्टेट में है. तो उसका रिएक्शन कैसे रहेगा, जस्ट इन्फ्लेमेशन होके डिसीज ठीक हो जाएगा, या इट गोज इनटू द सोरासिफिलिटिक बिकॉज इट इज अ वायरल इन्फेक्शन, may turns into the sorasyphilis and then turns into the frank syphilis. It depends on the underlying state of mind or state of the cell, बराबर है, state of cell. Now most of the people might have the question in your mind कि अगर हम ये सेलुलर लेवल पे बात कर रहे हैं, पैथोलॉजिकल लेवल पे बात कर रहे हैं, या चेंजेस ऑकर्ड एट द टिश्यू एंड ऑर्गन लेवल पे बात कर रहे हैं, सो दिस इज द पर्टिकुलर, बिकॉज इन होम्योपैथी पर्टिकुलर हैज द लिटिल इंपॉर्टेंस, राइट. अगर चेंजेस कुछ हो रहा है, जैसे इन्फ्लेमेशन हो रहा है, इंडुरेशन हो रहा है या नेक्रोसिस हो रहा है एट द पर्टिकुलर एरिया, पर्टिकुलर फिंगर, देन इट इज द पर्टिकुलर सिम्टम और पर्टिकुलर पैथोलॉजी. So why we give the importance to this particular? Now the changes which occurred at the particular level, try to understand this, the changes which occurred at the particular level of tissue or cell, that changes or response is not only of that individual cell or tissue, whatever the reaction or response shown by that particular cell or tissue is not of that cell or tissue, but a response governed by the genes of that individual person, man as a whole. So if after inflammation, If someone fingers goes into the induration or after inflammation, someone fingers or tissues goes into the necrosis, goes into the gangrenous form, is not decided by that cell, but the decided by the genetically programmed, मतलब genes. If it is genetically programmed कि ये इन्फ्लेमेशन के बाद तुरंत नेक्रोसिस में डेवलप हो जाएगा, so it is the gene who decide this, not a single cell. It is the whole organism who decide कि reaction to the particular stimuli. Try to understand this. This is very important. Means even if the disease or the pathology occurred at the particular area, that represent the whole person, whole individual. बराबर है कि नहीं? Is it clear? So it is the genome which prompts every individual cell, whether in response to invasion of bacteria, virus, parasite, or fungus. Try to understand. It is the genome, genetic material, genetic apparatus, which prompts every individual, है ना? Cell, whether in response to an noxious, whether to response to an invasion by bacteria. जब bacteria attack करता है virus और fungus, the cell should inflame, cell should indurate, or cell should destroy itself for the well-being of the person or individual concerned as a whole. This is not decided by the single cell. This is decided by the genome. बराबर? Genotype. So if it is decided by the genome or genetic apparatus, that means it represents the whole as an individual, not the single cell. Even I have given the very good example by Dr. Hegde कि उन्होंने जो liver transplant का एक केस narrate किया था, उसमें कैसे even the tissue or organ when it is donated by someone, right? So how the character of the individual at the level of mind or at the level of generals is also get transferred. So it was concluded that every cell has the mind. Every cell has the mind. So the response may or may not change at the different times in life depending again on the genetic makeup of that individual. मतलब आज अगर एक particular invasion of particular agent या microorganism से that person react or response with the inflammation. So that doesn't mean in the whole life he responds in that particular way itself. हो सकता है after 10 years, 20 years he responds with the induration. हो सकता है he responds with the destroy. It differ from time to time. It decided by the state of that state of that person or genetic makeup of that individual. Right? यहां तक समझा है? So we can conclude by all this discussion, we can conclude that whatever the changes we see at the pathological level during the assessment of disease are nothing but changes brought about to counter an injurious stimulus, that is the defense. मतलब whatever the changes that express by the injury, when there is a injurious stimulus is there, the changes is nothing but the defense of the body or defense of that cell. बराबर? All changes are governed by the genetic makeup of the individual. It is not the individual cell. It is governed by the genetic makeup of the individual. And changes differ according to the state of the organism. Vice versa, the defense of the organism. Whatever the changes occur because of the organism, because of the invading agent, is again due to the, matlab, it is differ. The changes differ in the life in the every individual. It depends on the state of that organism or defense of the organism. That means ultimately defense system of that organism. Is it clear? Why this is important? If you understand this, then you can able to categorize each and every disease, whether in कौन से भी phase में रहो. You can easily classify that disease into कि वो सोरिक माइजम में आता है, साइकोसिस में या सिफिलिटिक में आता है. But if you don't understand this, then it is. मैं अगर बताता हूँ कि is if someone told you कि diabetes is the syphilitic, that doesn't mean कि every diabetic patient is the syphilitic. बराबर है कि नहीं? You have to understand the basic phenomena, basic pathology, how to differentiate or how that diabetes comes in syphilitic. And according, if you study it properly scientifically, the diabetes can be a psoriatic, diabetes can be a psychotic, diabetes can be a syphilitic. Now, in what way the diabetes categorized into psora, psychosis, and syphilis? The answer is here. In what way? Though it is the psoriasis, when the psoriasis becomes psychosyphilitic, when the psoriasis becomes frank syphilitic. In the similar way, in all the diseases, even in the rheumatoid arthritis, there might be a, in rheumatoid arthritis, psychosis is predominant. Psychosyphilitic is predominant in the same disease, or might be in the same disease that there is a frank syphilis. Now it differs in the treatment. Now it differs. Though there is a brain tumor, है ना, brain tumor हमको तो लगता है बाप रे, brain में tumor है. So tumor indicate doesn't mean कि every tumor is the syphilitic. बराबर है कि नहीं? Every tumor is a syphilitic. So it depends on the underlying pathophysiology and pathology. We categorize the what changes that occurs, how the body cells or tissue express in what way. Depending on that, we understood the miasm. Now, if the convulsion occurs in the child or even in the adult because of some functional or change in the biochemistry, that means it is the psoric convulsion. And if the convulsions occurs in the person because of the benign tumor, it is the psychotic convulsions. So everything can be categorized, not a single disease. What we do up till now, क्या करते हैं हम कि एक disease उसमें हम स्टैंप लगा देते हैं कि ये अगर है तो यही है, डायबिटीज है तो साइकोसिस ही है. नॉट नेसेसरी. तो ये हमको सीखना है कि इसमें क्या डिफरेंस है, और वो डिफरेंस हम कैसे कैटेगराइज करेंगे, कैसे क्लासिफाई करेंगे, अकॉर्डिंग टू द अंडरलाइन चेंजेस एट द लेवल ऑफ सेल्स और टिश्यू और ऑर्गन. बराबर. In the material body cell defined. Why this defend or defense word come repeatedly? So the meaning of defend or defense is nothing but the guard from, to protect from the harm, to protect from the danger. If the soldiers are there at the border, India के border में अगर soldier है, तो they are like a guard to protect ourselves, to protect the India. If someone robbery going on and the police comes, this is to protect and catch that robbers. So defend or defense is nothing but it's a guard. So as a rule, defense an act or power of defending or guarding. So as a rule, anything in this world तो self defend कर रहा है, मतलब they are guarding or protecting themselves, protecting the individual organism. बराबर है कि नहीं? पर हमने सेल के फंक्शंस देखे हैं, उसमें देखा है कि सर्वाइव के लिए क्या करते हैं, रिजनरेशन, रिप्रोडक्शन के लिए और प्रोटेक्शन के लिए. But as a rule, anything in this world never has a single phase or a single dimensional existence नहीं होगा. That means if the life is there, that means the death is there, which is the eternal truth. If the black is there, that means the white is also there. बराबर है कि नहीं? अगर God है तो evil है. So there should be always opposite things exist. So there is always two opposite things has to exist if this world has to go on. बराबर है कि नहीं? Thus if there are the factors to prolong the life, अगर कुछ फैक्टर है जिससे हमारा लाइफ बढ़ रहा है, so there are the factor who trying to end our life, try to destroy our life. तो टू वे से है, अगर कुछ बातें हमारे लाइफ को प्रोलॉन्ग करती है तो कुछ चीजें हमारे लाइफ को, हमारे सिस्टम को डिस्ट्रॉय करती है. So the factors that are hostile to the our life or try to attack a living being in order that they themselves survive. So there is always a constant combat going on between offensive and defensive. बराबर है कि नहीं? अगर किसी को सरवाइव करना है तो दे ट्राइंग टू फाइट. बराबर है कि नहीं? बट ये फाइट में क्या होता है? देयर इज अ कॉम्बैट गोइंग ऑन कि वेदर दैट पर्सन इज लाइव और मे गोज इनटू द डेथ. So these offensive and defensive forces are result in whether the person survive or going into the death. Now the symptoms produced due to this combat, जब हमारे डिफेंस सिस्टम का और माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म का युद्ध चलता है, बराबर है कि नहीं? Symptoms produced due to this combat are what are identified as a disease. और वो कॉम्बैट जब चलता है एंड व्हाट आर द मैनिफेस्टेशन दैट ऑकर ड्यू टू दिस कॉम्बैट इज नथिंग बट वी कॉल्ड इट एज अ डिसीज. We called it as a diseases. So if the defense of the cell is at the base of the disease, मतलब डिसीज होने के लिए या डिसीज एक्सप्रेशन के लिए अगर सेल का डिफेंस इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल और द डिसीज पैथोलॉजी के लिए सेल का डिफेंस रिस्पॉन्सिबल है, वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड what can injure that cell. That means the cell used, how the cell used to defend, and therefore what can cause the disease, in what way the disease occur. Now what we understood in the homeopathy about mental thoughts, perception, delusions is the right, but here at the physical level we are trying to understand the causes at the, what are the causes that injured the cell. बराबर है कि नहीं? So there are different causes that injure the cell. Now when normal cell is under the attack or under the stress, when normal cell is under the stress, बराबर है कि नहीं? अगर कोई नॉर्मल ये है, मतलब कोई पर्सन है ना, वो अंडर द स्ट्रेस है. नाउ एट सम लेवल the body gets adapted to that stress. बराबर है कि नहीं? That doesn't means कि अगर स्ट्रेस आ गया इन फॉर्म ऑफ एनीथिंग, अगर स्ट्रेस आया तो बॉडी एकदम से हाइपर रिएक्ट करती है. दिस इज नॉट द मैकेनिज्म ऑफ द बॉडी. व्हाट द बॉडी डू, बॉडी ट्राइज टू मैनिपुलेट दैट एंड ट्राइज टू एडाप्ट इट. द बॉडी ट्राइज टू एडाप्ट इट. अगर आप जैसे कोई अगर कोल्ड इन्वायरमेंट में रहने का अगर किसी को आदत है, जो टूरिस्ट स्पॉट में रहते हैं वो एरिया वो रीजन में, और एकदम से हॉट वेदर में आ गए, जैसे नागपुर है, पूरा विदर्भ है, कहीं टेम्परेचर 20-25 रहता है, यहाँ पे टेम्परेचर 23-24 इस तरह से है. सो दैट डजंट मीन कि एवरी पर्सन गॉट इल एट द एक्सपोजर ऑफ द हाई टेम्परेचर. द बॉडी ट्राइज टू एडाप्ट इट. बराबर, अकॉर्डिंग टू द देयर जेनेटिक apparatus और genes का mechanism कैसा है, body tries to adapt it. So the genes regulate the cell metabolism, differentiation and specialization and decide its reaction to stimulus or stress. Now this reaction to stimulus or stress again regulated by the gene. बराबर. So physiological stress or pathological stimuli may bring about number of physiological or morphological adaptation during which new altered state of homeostasis is achieved. बराबर है. Maybe the stress is in the form of physiological, maybe stress is in the form of pathological. Now there are the changes occurred at the cellular level. There are the change or altered state of the homeostasis is there in the body. This change is meant to increase the viability of the cell. So whatever the changes that occurs is increase the viability of the life or viability of the cell, which is under the increased demand. Now for example, if you want to understand this, कि जैसे एक कुली रहता है, उसको they have the habit of lifting the weight at their shoulder or hand. Now repeated lifting of high weight, the body needs the extra energy or the cells need the extra mass. Then you can see in the कुली, अगर आपने कुली देखे होंगे तो उनके जो shoulders होते हैं, उनके जो arms होते हैं, बाइसेप ट्राइसेप ज्यादा बड़े होते हैं as compared to the other person. So in order to increase demand of increasing carrying the increasing weight, the body has to adapt, and changes occurs in the form of there is a hypertrophy of the muscles in the arms. There is a hypertrophy of muscles in the arms. So this is called as the adaptive mechanism by the body. So always you can see the adaptive mechanism in the form of hypertrophy, in the form of hyperplasia, in the form of even atrophy. And this adaptive mechanism not always the pathological, it is physiological also. So when the stress occur, when the person is under the stress or cell is under the stress, the cell adapt to the environment. बराबर है, like a coolie. Like another, you can see there is a hypertrophy of milk secreting glands or cells of the mammary gland during the pregnancy. This is because of there is a increased demand by the body to secrete the milk, and in order to secrete the milk, there is a hyperplasia of the cells. Milk secreting glands gets hyperplasia, cells get hyperplasia. The size of the mammary gland is getting increased. This is the physiological increase of the demand. That's why the body adapt it and do the hyperplasia or hypertrophy. बराबर है कि नहीं? This is called physiological adaptation. Right? This is called physiological adaptation. But if the adaptation crosses a limit, बराबर है कि नहीं? The cell gets injured. That means cell undergoes cell injury. अभी कुली है 30 kg का, अगर वेट वो ले रहा है पर्टिकुलर 35 का ले रहा है, बट अगर उसने 50 kg का ले लिया विच इज आउट ऑफ लिमिट, देन द एडेप्टेशन का जो मैकेनिज्म है वो ब्रेक हो जाएगा और द सेल इंजुरी ऑकर. बराबर है. सो what type of physiology or changes occur at the cellular level? Hypertrophy, that means increased size, atrophy, decreased size, hyperplasia, metaplasia in such a way. Now see, even in the athletes में क्या रहता है, इतना एक्सरसाइज करते हैं, बाइसेप्स बढ़ाते हैं, ट्राइसेप्स बढ़ाते हैं, बराबर है, वेट को उठाते हैं. So if the athletes are having the strong build up, strong muscles, that it means कि this is the abnormal. This is the body adaptation towards the increased demand. बराबर है. वो हाइपरट्रॉफी ऑफ हाइपरप्लासिया और हाइपरट्रॉफी ऑफ मसल्स के लिए उतना वर्कआउट करते हैं. बराबर है कि नहीं? Now you can also see the normal physiological atrophy in the brain of old age. ओल्ड एज में अगर एट्रोफी है, अगर ओल्ड एज 60 70 80 90 एज का है और उसमें अगर एट्रोफी ऑफ ब्रेन है, इट डजंट मींस इट इज द पैथोलॉजिकल. If it is at the earlier young age and if you see the significant atrophy in the brain, then you can call it as a pathological, right? So when the limit of adaptive response to stimulus are exceeded, है ना, जहां पे लिमिट क्रॉस हो जाती है, जहां पे एडेप्टेशन का अभी कोई चांस नहीं है, the cell injury occurs. The cell gets injured. Now this adaptation made by cells and tissue can be healthy or unhealthy. When the cells or tissue adapt and produce the homeostasis or equilibrium is reached with the change state, it is still healthy state. फॉर एग्जाम्पल कहीं होता है ना एथलेट्स में, जैसे मैंने बताया कि हाइपरट्रॉफी और हाइपरप्लाजी ऑफ मसल्स हो रहा है, but still it is in the healthy state, it is not in a disease. And similarly this happened in the child who having the septal defect, बराबर है, सेप्टल डिफेक्ट है तो क्या होता है, वेंट्रिकुलर हाइपरट्रॉफी होगा इन ऑर्डर टू मीट द इंक्रीज डिमांड ऑफ द बॉडी, है ना, जिसमें भी बच्चों में सेप्टल डिफेक्ट पाया जाता है उसमें वेंट्रिकुलर हाइपरट्रॉफी होती है. दिस इज द फिजियोलॉजिकल एडेप्टेशन by the body in order to meet the increased demand of the blood, बराबर है, but still this is called as the compensated adaptation, compensated adaptation, and the child is living a healthy life, child living a healthy life, and this is not a disease, and because it is not a disease it needs no correction, मतलब उसमें correction की जरूरत नहीं है. So adaptation can be physiological, adaptation can be healthy, adaptation can be unhealthy. So in cases of constant stimulus, the adaptation are not sufficient to reestablish the homeostasis. That's why the cell injury occur. Now this cell injury are two way, na? Reversible or irreversible. There are the factor which can injure the cell. जैसे physical agent है, oxygen deprivation है, ischemia है, chemical agent है, toxins है, drugs है, like that. Now see the, now we are collecting this in the factors which cause the injury to the cell from now, from the advanced pathology book or from the medicine book. But see how the Hahnemann has represented all these things which can injure the cell, like this physical agent, this and this chemical agent, 200 years ago. मतलब तब माइक्रोस्कोप नहीं था, एडवांस कोई इंस्ट्रूमेंट नहीं था कि ये समझने के लिए कि सेल इंजुरी हो रही है. एंड स्टिल द हनीमन हैज रिटन डाउन इन द ऑर्गेनन एफोरिज्म 73 what he written, as regards acute disease they are either of such a kind of attack human being individually, the exciting cause being injurious influences to which they were particularly exposed. Now, what are the injurious cause? Excess of food, insufficient supply of it, severe physical impression, chills, overeating, dissipation, strain, physical irritation, mental emotion, and like the exciting causes of such acute febrile affection. In reality, they are generally only a transient explosion of latent sora, which spontaneously return to the dormant or acute disease, were not of too violent character or not some equal. That means Hahnemann has put down the causes of disease, injurious influences on the organism, which is 200 years back through this organon aphorism. And all this has given is now it is true. Except Hahnemann has given the importance, additional importance to the mental emotion, which is our modern pathology doesn't accept. The difference is that, right? This is the normal cell when the cell is under the stress, the adaptation occurs. If the injurious stimuli is more virulent, then the cell injury occur. If the person or cell is inability to adapt, the cell injury occur. Now the cell injury could be reversible or reversible or irreversible. Now in the irreversible cell injury, that means वो cells अपने previous state में नहीं आएगा. That means there is a necrosis or apoptosis. Apoptosis means cell death, programmed cell death or cell suicide. बराबर है. अभी सेल कैसे डिफेंड करता है, उसका मैकेनिज्म क्या है, अभी डायरेक्टली हम इसको कनेक्ट करेंगे माइज्म से. ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस, दिस इज मोर प्रैक्टिकल पॉइंट. जैसे कि हमने देखा कि प्राइमरी मोड ऑफ डिफेंस इज द एडेप्टेबिलिटी, मतलब सेल हैज अडेप्ट इटसेल्फ टू द इंक्रीज डिमांड, बराबर है, जो नॉर्मल स्ट्रेस रहता है, बराबर है. But such a normal adaptation response is observed only in a natural stress oriented or exercise oriented factor in which the muscle or tissue try and reestablish a homeostatic equilibrium, change circumstances by bringing about change in themselves. But when the stimulus is more irritating, more virulent, more destructive, more injurious, like parasites, microorganism जैसे parasite, virus, chemicals. Now, in such a cause where the stimulus is more virulent, more destructive, the cell take a different stand. अभी एक हद तक सेल एडेप्ट कर लेता है बाय इंटरनल change in the internal environment or external environment, but there must be a some जो sustenance capacity है कितना रहेगा. If it cross, then the cell injury occurred. Here the cells take a different stand. The defense which follow are as follow. तो इसमें क्या होता है जब सेल दूसरा स्टैंड लेता है एडेप्टेशन के अलावा. So the every cell or living organism faces damage or cell injury from pathogen, toxin, chemical, radiation, thermal factor, etc. All these are the factors which injured the cell. It has different type of mechanism to defend itself. When the virulence organism or destructive effect is there over the cell, then the cell defend in a different way. Now, first is called as the physiological defense and second is called as the morphological defense. Adaptation is the normal. पर अगर adaptation को cross कर रहा है, so there is a first physiological changes that occurs in the cell or tissue that is called as the physiological defense. And the second may be or may not be the morphological defense. Now, morphological means there is a change in the structure, change in the cellular structure. That's why this morphology is again divided into the two, constructive morphology and destructive morphology. So there is a physiological defense, constructive morphological defense and destructive morphological defense. We can divide this cell defense or self defense into the three. What way the cell defending their self. So the physiological defense, morphological constructive and morphological destructive defense. Try to understand this. कि इसमें क्या होता है. जैसे हम देखते हैं ना कि फिजियोलॉजी मतलब क्या है, जहां पे फिजियोलॉजी चेंज होती है, जहां पे बायोकेमिस्ट्री चेंज होती है, बट देयर इज अ नो चेंज इन द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर सेल, नो डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑकर. बराबर है, सिर्फ फिजियोलॉजी चेंज होता है. फिजियोलॉजी मीन्स नॉर्मल फंक्शनिंग ऑफ द सेल. मतलब सिक्रेशन बढ़ जाएगा, एंजाइम ज्यादा सिक्रेट होंगे. मीन्स अगर एपीडी है, एसिड पेप्टिक डिसऑर्डर, मतलब एक्यूट अगर गैस्ट्राइटिस हुआ है, बराबर है, सो यहाँ पे फिजियोलॉजिकल चेंज हो रहा है. पर अगर उसमें causes the ulcer in the gastric mucosa, there is the morphological changes that occurs at the stomach. बराबर है. If the induration occur in the stomach lining, some stomach cell induration or some growth or polyp or tumor, this is the constructive way the cells are defending their self. So all these changes that occurs, we can classify these changes into the three: physiological, constructive and destructive. And physiology means healthy functioning. So it means defense by a cell. Now physiological defense. Try to understand this physiological defense. मतलब क्या होता है? ये तीनों डिफेंस अगर समझ गए तो माइज्म आपको समझ में आ जाएगा. It means defense by a cell or organism brought about by promoting the natural or normal healthy functioning in the cell or tissue. मतलब though the microorganism attack, but the changes that occurs at the cellular or tissue level is just a functional changes that occur or change in biochemistry. That means अगर सर्दी हुई है, बराबर है, सर्दी अगर हुआ है तो क्या हो रहा है, नेजल सिक्रेशन इंक्रीज हुआ है. तो अगर नेजल सिक्रेशन हुआ है, रेडनेस आया है, माइल्ड स्वेलिंग आया है ना, सो दैट मीन्स इट इज द फिजियोलॉजिकल चेंजेस दैट ऑकर्स एट दैट लेवल. बट व्हेन द ये जब होता है ना, कोराइजा है, मतलब सेल्स फ्लूइड बढ़ा लेता है इन ऑर्डर टू डिस्ट्रॉय दैट, ये अगर फेल होता है, द प्राइमरी इम्यूनो रिस्पॉन्स ऑफ इन्फ्लेमेशन इज यूज. अगर ये काम नहीं आता है डिफेंस, तो इन्फ्लेमेशन स्टार्ट हो जाता है टू गेट राइड ऑफ दिस इन्वेजिव स्टिमुलाई. Now, why this inflammation occurs, which is the protective mechanism in order to remove this infective agent. And what they do, they proceeded by the increased sensitivity and irritation. What the inflammation do? In the inflammation, they increase the sensitivity, they increase the irritation of the cell. Right? Now the sole aim to do such a type of changes is to make the bacteria die its own death by changing the temporarily the biochemistry within the cell or the neighboring tissue. बराबर है. क्यों ये क्यों होता है? हमारी बॉडी व्हाई दे रिएक्ट और एक्ट इन सच अ वे दैट कि वहां पे इन्फ्लेमेशन हो जाता है, इरिटेशन होता है, हाइपर सेंसिटिविटी होती है, टू मेक द बैक्टीरिया डाई, टू मेक द बैक्टीरिया डाई इट्स ओन डेथ. मतलब सेल्स क्या करते हैं? अपने इन्वायरमेंट में चेंज लाते हैं, बायोकेमिस्ट्री को अपने चेंज करते हैं, विच इज द टेम्पररी इन नेचर, इन ऑर्डर टू remove the microorganism. So when this occur, when the cell try to remove the microorganism or invading agent by the way of defense like inflammation, this is the first defense that is called as the physiological defense. This is the first defense, that is the physiological defense. Now, physiological defense. Now, in the pathology book also categorically state that the inflammation is a protective response. Now, if you see कि अगर inflammation होता है तो inflammation is bad है, नहीं होना चाहिए inflammation. But try to understand this: when any microorganism or any invasive agent try to invade your cell, tissue, system, the body has to react. And this reaction is not a bad, it is a good. Because when this reaction occur, then only that external microorganism or the invasive agents is die or go out. बराबर, by this way of protective response, that is the inflammation. अगर इन्फ्लेमेशन नहीं होता है तो क्या होगा ना, फिर अगर कोई एक्सटर्नल ऑर्गेनिज्म बोलो या इन्वेजिव एजेंट है, अपने बॉडी पे अटैक किया और बॉडी कुछ भी शो नहीं कर रही है, दैट मीन्स दैट माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म अटैक करेगा और वायरुलेंट और डिस्ट्रक्टिव पैथोलॉजी डेवलप करेगा, क्योंकि ये जो प्राइमरी डिफेंस है वही आपका एक्टिव नहीं है, मतलब इन्फ्लेमेशन. तो प्राइमरी अगर डिफेंस एक्टिव नहीं है तो वो अलग डिफेंस में चले जाएंगे और वो डिस्ट्रॉय तो करेंगे ना बॉडी को. So this, without inflammation, infection would go unchecked, wound will never heal, and injured organ and tissue might remain permanently ulcerated and damaged. That's why this first line of physiological defense is very important, that is the inflammation. What they serve? They serve to destroy, dilute or wall off the injurious agent and in turn set up the series of events which heal and reconstruct the damaged tissue. एक तो इसको माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म को भगाएगा और दूसरा जो भी डैमेज हुआ है उसको रिपेयर करेगा, दिस इन्फ्लेमेशन. So that's why it is called as a protective mechanism or a protective response. And this is not that why homeopathy is calling this. This is given in the Robbins pathology. This is given in the Robbins pathology. So if a tissue or cell shows a defensive response in a particular way, it means that every cell should show such a defensive response. So ultimately, it is the tendency to inflammation or recurrent infection which are harmful and should be taken care of rather than just the inflammation. So if the person suffered with the inflammation, that doesn't means it is harmful to the body. That means if the inflammation occurs, what they are, this is the guard. मतलब अगर बंदूक चली है बॉर्डर पे, that doesn't means कि it is a bad. अगर कोई उस देश का बंदा या कोई अगर टेररिस्ट अगर एंटर करता है, तो in order to remove that terrorist, we have to shoot. The soldier have to shoot in order to remove, in order to make him die. अगर हम वो नहीं करेंगे, वो शूट नहीं करेंगे या इन्फ्लेमेशन नहीं होगा, तो वो टेररिस्ट एंट्री करेगा एंड कॉजेज द मोर वायलेंस टू द नेशन, टू नेशन. बराबर है. अगर एक टेररिस्ट आए तो दो भी आ सकते हैं, तीन भी आ सकते हैं, चार भी आ सकते हैं. सो दिस डिफेंस इज इंपॉर्टेंट. बराबर है. अभी अगर अभी अगर रिकरेंट होता है, अभी इसमें कभी कभी ये जो इन्फ्लेमेशन है उसको कोई मेडिसिन देने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती. बट इफ देर इज अ टेंडेंसी फॉर द इन्फ्लेमेशन और रिकरेंसी, लाइक द child suffering with the recurrent upper respiratory tract infection, lower respiratory tract infection, then we need to treat them. बराबर है. we need to treat them. So the first defense of inflammation often associated with the irritation, sensitivity, redness and swelling. This is the changes that occurs at the pathological, मतलब pathological level in the acute inflammation. Now अगर अगर फर्स्ट डिफेंस जो है फिजियोलॉजिकल डिफेंस अगर काम नहीं करता है, बराबर है कि नहीं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर सोल्जर उनके पास अगर कोई राइफल है या कोई इंस्ट्रूमेंट है ना, जो डिफेंस इंस्ट्रूमेंट है, उससे अगर वो टेररिस्ट को मारने की कोशिश करते हैं एंड दे आर फेल टू डू दैट, तो इसमें क्या होता है ना, हायर डिफेंस सिस्टम एक्टिव हो जाता है. क्या होता है, हायर डिफेंस सिस्टम एक्टिव हो जाता है. तो उसमें ऐसा हो सकता है कि दो दो चार सोल्जर सोल्जर है, तो 10-15 सोल्जर आ जाएंगे, कमांडो आ जाएंगे. जो स्पेशलाइज कमांडो है वो एक्टिव मोड पे आके वहां आ जाएंगे. या फिर वायुसेना के जो चॉपर्स बोलते हैं, है ना, जो प्लेन है, वो हवे से मतलब एयर से अटैक करेंगे दुश्मन पे. सो अटैक थ्रू द एयर विच इज द हायर डिफेंस, मोर वाइल हायर डिफेंस होगी. मतलब एक डिफेंस जब काम नहीं करता है ना, तो सिस्टम को या अपने गवर्नमेंट बोलो या वो सिस्टम को उनका डिफेंस चेंज करना पड़ता है. मतलब हायर डिफेंस लेना पड़ता है. अगर उससे भी काम नहीं हुआ तो उससे हायर डिफेंस यूज करना. इन द सेम वे द बॉडी हैज डन द डूइंग द सेम फिनोमिना. दिस applicable in the same way. When the first defense has failed to get right the toxin or pathogens like a microorganism, it decide to go in for a second line of defense by shifting the gear of the defense. बराबर है कि नहीं. अभी फॉर एग्जाम्पल द टू पीपल्स, नाउ एक्स एंड वाई, इट इज एग्जाम्पल्स गिवन इन द बुक. एक्स एंड वाई पर्सन है. अभी वाई पर्सन इज वेरी माइल्ड, वेरी जेंटल, वेरी कंसेंशियस पर्सन है, जो कभी झगड़ा नहीं करता है, नेवर लाइक टू कॉरल, नेवर टेक पार्ट्स इन द कॉरल और नेवर फाइट. बट द एक्स है वो एक्स्ट्रा है. एक्स मतलब he is not a mild, but he is having the fighting attitude. He like to torture others, so he tries to poke through the instrument or whatever the means is there. He tries to, X tries to poke the Y, and they poking to the Y person. So now when poking, the Y person showing their defense through the irritations, through the redness, through the functional way, like inflammation. अभी जब इन्फ्लेमेशन से भी काम नहीं हो रहा है, वो पोकिंग कंटिन्यू शुरू है बाय द एक्स पर्सन, देन व्हाई द वाई डू, उसको तो फाइट नहीं करना है ना, डायरेक्टली फाइट नहीं करना है। सो वाई पर्सन क्या करेगा, दे गार्ड हिमसेल्फ, तो एक फैटी लेयर जमा कर देगा या कुछ तो भी ऐसा कवरिंग करेगा जिससे वो पोकिंग इंस्ट्रूमेंट जो है जिससे पोकिंग हो रहा है वो नहीं होगा। दे गार्ड देमसेल्व्स थ्रू द इंडुरेशन, through the growth, through the polyp, like such a pathology. पर है ना, तो दिस इज कॉल्ड एज द सेकंड डिफेंस, कि अगर एक पहला डिफेंस काम नहीं कर रहा है तो फिर सेकंड लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस पे चले जाओ। दिस इज कॉल्ड सेकंड डिफेंस, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज द कंस्ट्रक्टिव डिफेंस, कंस्ट्रक्टिव मॉर्फोलॉजिकल डिफेंस. So at the level of cell and its part, accumulation start taking place. The accumulation occur at the cellular level, cell wall or cytoplasm. Cell wall start thickening of cell by excess lipid, proteins, fats. Thus, a wall develop to protect the cell from irritation. This thickening occurs due to the excess production of the everything in the cell or the system. बराबर है कि नहीं, मतलब इन्फ्लामेशन से काम नहीं हो रहा है तो गियर चेंज हो गया, डिफेंस चेंज हो गया, तो बॉडी कैसे रिएक्ट कर रही है, थिकनिंग से प्रोटेक्ट कर रही है, एक्सेस प्रोडक्शन ऑफ, मतलब सेल वॉल थिकन कर रही है, इंडुरेट कर रही है, सो दैट द इरिटेशन जो पोकिंग है उससे उसको तकलीफ ना हो, राइट. नाउ सच अ पैथोलॉजी which can arise out of such a defense include the growth thickening pathology like polyps, warts, cyst, tumor, atherosclerotic change, plaque, or deposition of pigment and deposition of minerals like this. पहले इसमें क्या होता है ना, रेडनेस होता है, स्वेलिंग होता है, अभी दूसरे इसमें क्या हो रहा है, ग्रोथ हो रही है, थिकनिंग हो रही है इन द फॉर्म ऑफ ट्यूमर, इन द फॉर्म ऑफ पॉलिप. बराबर है. तो दिस इज द सेकंड डिफेंस, सेकंड कंस्ट्रक्टिव डिफेंस. अभी अगर सेकंड कंस्ट्रक्टिव डिफेंस से भी काम नहीं हो रहा है, ये जो एक्स पर्सन है ये कंटिन्यू पोकिंग कर ही रहा है, कंटिन्यू इरिटेशन दे ही रहा है, कंटिन्यू पोक कर रहा है, पोक कर रहा है. वाई पर्सन तो साइलेंट है, पर रिएक्शन तो देगा ना, पैसिव रिएक्शन देगा. तो व्हाट दे डू, द थर्ड डिफेंस इज द डिस्ट्रक्टिव डिफेंस. अभी अपने आप को बचाने के लिए वो क्या करेगा, जहां पे ये पोकिंग हो रहा है जैसे शोल्डर पे या राइट हैंड पे हो रहा है, और राइट हैंड की बलि दे देगा, मतलब पूरे पार्ट्स को, अपने होल बॉडी को अगर बचाना है ना, तो इसको डिस्ट्रॉय होने देगा. सो ही डिस्ट्रॉय. बराबर है कि नहीं. सो व्हेन द फर्स्ट डिफेंस ऑफ इन्फ्लेमेशन इज नॉट सफिशिएंट टू टेक केयर बाय द इन्वेडिंग होस्टाइल स्टिमुलस, द सेल में अंडरगो चेंजेस एट द जेनेटिक लेवल. इन्फ्लेमेशन से अगर जब काम नहीं होता तो changes which occurs is at the genetic level. It shifts its gear of defense to defend or save the whole organism by destroying a part of it. मतलब बॉडी अपने पार्ट या ऑर्गन अपने पार्ट की बलि दे देता है, मतलब अपने आप को अलाउ देमसेल्व्स टू डिस्ट्रॉय, बिकॉज उसका बाकी होल बॉडी को बचाना है. So this defense can also be resorted after a constructive defense, not only the after inflammation, but after the constructive defense constructed. The pathological condition that arise out of such defense is the destruction or destructive pathologies like a gangrene, like a necrosis, like a ulcers. Try to understand the pathological condition that arise out of such defense include the destructive pathology. क्या हो जाएगा वहां पे, अभी वहां पे इंड्यूरेशन था तो अभी अल्सर डेवलप हो जाएगा, वहां गैंग्रीन डेवलप हो जाएगा या नेक्रोसिस हो जाएगा. दिस चेंजेस इज आल्सो बाय द सेल बट कंट्रोल्ड बाय द जीन्स. सो नाउ वी कैन सी हियर द सेल डेथ ऑकर इन द थर्ड, दैट मीन नेक्रोसिस और एपोप्टोसिस. बराबर है कि. नाउ इफ यू सी अंडरस्टैंड होल दिस फिनोमेना, कैसे समझेंगे आप. हम इसको मॉडर्न साइंस से कोरिलेट करेंगे कि सेल अगर ऐसे डिफेंड कर रहा है, cell in what way they defend in a by producing the inflammation, cell defend by producing the induration, growth. thickening of the cell wall, or cell defend by destruction of the part in the form of necrosis, apoptosis, gangrene, like this. So, material body defense, vice versa, miasm. Cell defense and the miasm. How we correlate this? So, according to the modern science, the inflammatory and irritative pathology, according to the modern science, the inflammatory and irritative pathology seems to come from physiological defense. The growth pathology seems to emanate from the constructive defense, and the destructive pathology seems to comes from the destructive defense. Now there are the three defense: physiological defense, constructive defense, and destructive defense. And this defense is nothing but the miasm. Now how we correlate this to the miasm? See, the aphorism 80 talks of chronic miasm, सोरा हाँ, जहाँ पे हनीमन ने भी बोला है कि सोरा में क्या होता है, इरिटेशन होता है। साइकोसिस में कॉन्डिलोमेटस डिसीज होता है, मतलब डिसीज ऑफ ग्रोथ, जो पहले हमने इनिशियल फर्स्ट सेशन में बताया था। और सिफिलिस में क्या होता है, शैंकर वेनरल डिसीज, दैट इज डिसीज ऑफ डिस्ट्रक्शन, है ना, डिस्ट्रक्टिव डिसीज। दिस इज written in the aphorism 79 and 80 by the in the Organon of medicine. We are in the right track कि हम इसको पैथोलॉजी को कैसे, जो हनीमन ने मेंशन किया है ना, जो लिखा है, उसको हम कैसे कोरिलेट कर रहे हैं। So from the above similarity, one can safely presume and conclude that Dr. Hahnemann miasm of Sora psychosis and syphilis have its root in the defensive response of the cell to injurious influence. तो जो हनीमन ने सोरा एंड साइकोसिस सिफिलिस को डिस्क्राइब किया है, इन द वे डिस्क्राइब वी कैन कोरिलेट दैट इनटू द डिफेंसिव रिस्पांस ऑफ द सेल। अभी सेल का डिफेंसिव रिस्पांस क्या है, इरिटेशन है। सेल का डिफेंसिव इंड्यूरेशन है। सेल का डिफेंसिव रिस्पांस क्या है, डिस्ट्रक्टिव टू द इंजूरियस इन्फ्लुएंसेस। नाउ दैट मीन्स द सोरा is nothing but the physiological defense response. Psychosis is nothing but the constructive defense response, and syphilis is nothing but the destructive defense response. So cell has only the three defense response. So there can be only a three miasm. अगर cell three way से अगर react कर रहा है to the stimulus और microorganism और noxious influence और external जो अटैक करने वाले जो ये है माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म, अगर सेल अगर थ्री वे से रिस्पॉन्ड कर रहा है, फिजियोलॉजिकल वे, कंस्ट्रक्टिव वे एंड डिस्ट्रक्टिव वे, then there can be only a three miasm, not a four miasm. बराबर है कि नहीं? Then there is not a more than three miasm. So using or sacrificing the primary or first function of the nutrition and respiration, the cell brings about the physiological defense, that is the SORA, जो हमने सेल का फंक्शंस देखे थे। सेकंड में क्या होता है, रीजनरेशन, using sacrificing the second function of the generation or the cell capacity regenerate, that is the mitosis, मतलब cell reproduction. Then it corresponds to the psychosis, and using or sacrificing the third basic function of the cell, that is the immunity, the morphological destructive defense is brought about. This corresponds to the syphilis. मतलब जो फर्स्ट फंक्शन है न्यूट्रिशन, दैट गोज टू द सोरा, सेकंड रीजनरेशन, रिप्रोडक्शन बाय सैक्रिफाइसिंग द फंक्शन ऑफ माइटोसिस, मतलब ये अल्टर्ड हो जाता है माइटोसिस, व्हिच करस्पॉन्ड्स टू द साइकोसिस, एंड थर्ड फंक्शन व्हिच इज द इम्यूनिटी, that is the destructive, that is the syphilis, right? So we correlate the changes that occurs at the cellular level into the miasm. So that's why we can conclude that there are only a three basic function of cell and there are the three basic miasm. क्या conclude करेंगे? If there are the three basic function of the cell, Therefore, only a three basic defense responses exist. थ्री बेसिक डिफेंसिव रिस्पॉन्स है ना, हमने देखे ना, इन्फ्लेमेशन, ग्रोथ एंड द डिस्ट्रक्शन, थ्री बेसिक रिस्पॉन्स exist. Therefore, only a three type of chronic diseases exist, and that's why we can conclude that there can be only a three miasm exist, which is psora, psychosis, and syphilis. Which is the psora, psychosis, and syphilis. Now we can understand this in a deep through the organon of medicine, which is that aphorism which reflect the whole three miasm. That is the aphorism number 74, which is the most important aphorism in the whole book of the organ. Read it repeatedly so that you can able to understand कि कैसे हमने पैथोलॉजी को, मतलब पैथोलॉजिकली हनीमन खुद पैथोलॉजी को उस डीपली समझते थे. दैट्स व्हाई इट रिफ्लेक्ट्स इन द aphorism in the organon of medicine. What it stated in the aphorism number 74, क्या बताया है? Among the chronic disease, we must still, alas, reckon those so commonly met with artificially produced in allopathic treatment, जो chronic disease है, by the prolonged use of violent heroic medicine. मतलब chronic disease कैसे फॉर्म होते हैं, कैसे शुरू होता है, कैसे बनता है ना, heroic medicine से in large and increasing doses by the abuse of calomel, corrosive sublimate, mercurial ointment, nitrate of silver, iodine and its ointment, opium, valerian, cinchona bark, and quinine. Foxglove. This is the way that the treatment occur in the that time period. Sulfur and sulfuric acid, perennial purgatives, venesection, shedding stream of blood, leeches issue section wise, vital energy sometimes weakened. मतलब ये सब फैक्टर्स है, वाइटल एनर्जी एकदम एग्जॉस्ट हो जाती थी टू एन अनमर्सीफुल एक्सटेंट. समटाइम्स इफ इट इज डू नॉट सकम, ग्रेजुअली एबनॉर्मली डीअरेंज. That was the factor which exhausts the person's vitality in such a way that in order to maintain, this is important, in order to maintain the life against this inimical and destructive attack, it must produce a revolution in the organism. अगर हमको बचना ही है, लाइफ को बचाना है, तो there is a revolution in the organism occurs and either deprive some part of its irritability and sensibility or exert this to an excessive degree. Exert this to an excessive degree, cause the dilatation, cause the contraction, relaxation, or induration, or even the total destruction of the certain parts, and develop faulty organic alteration here and there in the interior or exterior in order to preserve the organism from complete destruction of life by ever renewed hostile assault of such a destructive forces. See how nicely the Hahnemann represent what the pathological changes occurs step by step. मतलब ये जब अटैक करता है डिस्ट्रक्टिव एजेंट, तो क्या करता है, बॉडी इंक्रीज देयर सेंसिबिलिटी, इंक्रीज देयर इरिटेबिलिटी, exalt to an excessive degree, or it may cause the dilatation and contraction, it may cause the relaxation or induration, or even the total destruction of the certain parts, and develop the faulty organic alteration and here and there in order to preserve the organism. मतलब जो मैंने एक्स वाई का एग्जांपल दिया है कि होल ऑर्गेनिज्म अपने लाइफ को बचाने के लिए, अपने बॉडी को बचाने के लिए वो हाथ की कुर्बानी दे देंगे, एंड ही सफर्ड विद द नेक्रोसिस एंड ऑल अदर गैंग्रीन लाइक पैथोलॉजी, दैट इज द डिस्ट्रक्टिव पैथोलॉजी. बराबर है कि नहीं? तो हम इसको कैसे समझेंगे इन अनदर वे? इससे थ्री टाइप्स ऑफ रिवोल्यूशन जो हनीमन ने मेंशंस किया है इन द एफोरिज्म 74. How the Sora represent in that aphorism? Deprive some part of its irritability and sensibility or exalt this to an excessive degree, which follows the physiological defense, that is the Sora. This reflect the sora, irritability and sensibility. Second, how the psychosis is reflect through the aphorism, dilatation, relaxation, induration and contraction. Now, how the dilatation occur? It is caused by the less fibrin. Dilatation हो रहा है मतलब less fibrin, that is called psychosis less. Relaxation हो रहा है मतलब elastin है, relaxation, relax हो रहा है part या organ, that means there is the less elastin. Elastin is responsible to form the structure. So there is a psychosis. This is called psychosis less. Induration of tissue is caused by the excess of fibrin production. That is called psychosis excess. And contraction is caused by the excess of elastin, that is or excess of elastin production, that is also called as the psychosis excess. So the psychosis comes in two ways, psychosis less and psychosis excess. And how it comes? मतलब फाइब्रिन कम है, इलास्टिन कम है तो क्या होगा? डायलिटेशन और रिलैक्सेशन होगा. और फाइब्रिन और इलास्टिन की मात्रा प्रोडक्शन अगर एक्सेस में है तो क्या होगा? कॉन्ट्रैक्शन या इंड्यूरेशन होगा, which is the changes occurs in the psychosis. So every pathology which is characterized by dilatation, relaxation, induration and contraction, it is nothing but the comes under the psychosis, right? And third is the syphilis, where there is a total destruction of certain parts, that is the necrosis, to save the whole organism, whole body, whole human being. Develop the faulty organic alteration, that is the distortion of the part, crippling the body internally or externally, that means the syphilis. When third इसमें क्या होता है डिफेंस में कि there is a destruction of the certain parts to save the whole, and this is described in the Organon aphorism number 74. तो इससे हम कंक्लूड करते हैं कि सोरा में क्या होता है चेंजेस, साइकोसिस में क्या होते हैं और सिफिलिस में क्या होता है. If you understand the process till now, then you can able to differentiate very easily how the sora represent or manifest in the through the disease pathology, how the psychosis manifests through the disease pathology, and how the syphilis manifests through the disease pathology. Right? I think this is enough for today. It's more than 4:30. This way, what we are doing the pathological cellular changes or alteration at the cellular level to the scientifically the changes that occurs at the cell to the miasm by understanding the cell function and expression of the cell or the reaction of the cell or defense of the cell when cell is under the attack. बराबर है कि नहीं? और उसको हमने माइजम से जोड़ा है. और we are doing the same things in every case, in every disease. कि cellular changes, alterations क्या हुआ है, and how the that disease express through the body. बराबर है कि नहीं? That we have to understand. So फिर हमको समझेगा कि अगर एक्सेसिव स्केलिंग हो रहा है सोरियासिस में, स्केलिंग है ना, या कहीं पे हाइपरट्रोफी हो रहा है, हाइपरप्लाजिया हो रहा है, तो ये कौन से माइजम में है? इफ देयर इज अ रिलैक्सेशन ऑफ टिश्यू और रिलैक्सेशन ऑफ वेन, डायलेटेशन ऑफ वेन है, फॉर एग्जांपल इन द हेमोरॉइड्स, क्या होता है हेमोरॉइड्स में? देयर इज अ डायलेटेशन ऑफ हेमोरॉइडल वेन, relaxation of hemorrhoidal vein, that means it comes under the psychosis. बराबर है कि नहीं? It comes under the psychosis. If there is a excessive proliferation of cells in the psoriasis, but it is then further pathology is worsening in the form of cracks and hemorrhage, then it is a syphilitic. Right? So like this. So in the next session, we will take the miasm sora. So each one session require each session require the 3 session is required. The SORA require 1 session, psychosis 1 and syphilis 1. And after that, we can actually see the different disease condition and how we can miasmatically understand that disease process or disease. And then we will see the mental rubrics and how we can classify that mental rubrics miasmatically. How we classify that mental rubrics miasmatically. Like a mischievous है तो क्या है, affectionate है तो कौन से miasm में, affectation है तो कौन से miasm में आएगा, बराबर है. So like that. So we can conclude this session. Thank you very much.